Hi, I'm Ross Mayfield, investment strategy analyst at Baird, and we are back for another weekly video with our friends at Strategas. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Washington research analyst Jeannette Lowe to talk all things DC. Jeannette, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Ross?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thank you for asking. It feels a bit haphazard right now. There's a lot of moving parts, but no one big unifier. So let's just start with kind of a high level. What are the policy initiatives that the party in power can enact or are trying to enact as we lead up to this midterm election that is rapidly approaching?
It's a great question because there does seem to be several efforts that are moving in different pieces, and we kind of make fits and starts of progress of where we're going on certain things in Washington. So I think there's a couple of things to keep an eye on. The first is a bipartisan effort, and that is the U.S. competition bill. This is a bill to try to make the U.S. better compete with China. This has bipartisan support. The House and the Senate are currently doing negotiations to come up with a final version of that bill. It's going to be pretty important for things like providing $52 billion for domestic chip manufacturing and research and design elements, trying to provide some other research efforts into things like AI, quantum computing, things like that. And then also some efforts to put some funding towards maybe increasing solar investment in the US or doing other things along those lines. So it's kind of going to be much more of an investment bill. And that's something that we are seeing some progress on. Congress does want to try to work that out by the end of June. So that's one thing we're kind of keeping an eye on. The second thing is that Senator Manchin has been leading this effort to do a bipartisan energy bill. So this would be a bill that would kind of take some of the renewable energy tax credits that were included in the Democrats' Build Back Better reconciliation bill, and then pair those with some initiatives that would also support the domestic fossil fuel industry as well. And it's a little bit early in the process to know exactly where it's going, but I think there is some effort to see how far that can go, and could that be done before the midterm elections as well. Could also fall into later in the year, but I think that there's some effort to try to get something put together. That then also has implications for the Democrats' Build Back Better reconciliation bill, which is this third piece that we're kind of watching this summer. So there's been some stalled efforts, mostly on the part of Senator Manchin, to get that bill going again. He does want to support the domestic fossil fuel industry, which is why we've seen some stalling out on the Democrat-only initiative to move it forward. If he's successful in getting this bipartisan energy bill done, that would actually make the reconciliation bill smaller if they're still going to do it. Now, they may not do it. That's one thing to kind of keep in mind, but they may also do it just because Democrats are looking as this might be one of their last chances to get something done before the midterm elections, when they may potentially lose the House. They may also potentially lose the Senate. So they may still want to get something done through that reconciliation process. It could have climate provisions in it, or those could go into this bipartisan energy bill, or it could have just healthcare provisions. And that would be things like extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies that were enhanced and extended as part of the pandemic. And that could be a big piece in there, as well as some drug pricing controls that we're watching out for.
So, as we mentioned, a lot of moving parts, still a lot unsettled, but one thread that kind of seems to be touching all of these pieces is inflation, whether it's onshoring and making supply chains more robust, whether it's energy security and looking at what has happened in the oil markets recently to prevent further shocks there or future shocks. What else is the current administration trying to do on inflation? I know there's been some talk about easing tariffs from China, which could have an impact there. What else are you seeing there? I know that's a huge political issue ahead of the midterms as well.
It definitely is, and it's going to be a problem for the Democrats for this messaging ahead of the midterm election. And unfortunately, there aren't really a lot of things that they seem to be able to do to make a difference. As you mentioned, China tariffs are one thing that they are looking at. The administration has said that it is looking at potentially lifting tariffs on Chinese goods as one way to help with inflation. But there's also disagreements within the administration as to whether that would be a good policy or a bad policy, because then it would also take away some leverage with regard to China and trying to make it change its tactics with regard to trade. Biden has also said that he thinks that the unions are going to be really important in this decision. They have come out in opposition to having the tariffs removed. So one thing we're kind of watching instead is whether or not there could be more exemptions for U.S. goods that are current or the U.S. imports that are currently subject to tariffs, and whether that could be have greater exemptions that could provide some relief from these tariffs. That could be part of the China bill that we are seeing being discussed currently, but that's one thing that they're looking at. They're also trying to do some other things with regard to gas prices, but their bill that they're going to be discussing this week is more about saying that companies can't charge exorbitant prices and trying to crack down in that way. They're going to try to alleviate the baby formula shortage, which is something else that's been a big political issue. But a lot of the efforts that they're going to do aren't really going to make a lot of difference with inflation. It's really going to be falling more on what comes out of the Fed.
Yeah, exactly. And that's they're obviously trying to raise rates aggressively to combat inflation, but a lot more to come there. Well, this has been a really good primer. I know that discussions around DC and policy will certainly ramp up as we head towards November. So we'll definitely have you back on. But I want to thank you so much for the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ross.